Welcome to this data analytics tutorial that covers sales, cost, and gross profit analysis using pivot tables and charts in Excel. In this activity, we are using a sales and cost data set for a fictitious company, Cabinet Accessories Company, CAC. The sales and cost data covers a multi-year period. For this tutorial only, we are using a small 36 record data set. For the actual activity, you will be using the full data set, so the answers for the activity requirements will be different, but the process will be similar. For this tutorial on pivot tables and pivot charts, we will be demonstrating using Office 365 Excel for Windows. Other versions of Excel may be slightly different. Also note that there may be many ways of accomplishing the same thing. We are just presenting one way here. Make sure your Office version of 365 is updated. You may not see things the same way if you have not updated recently. Again, please be sure to update your version of Excel before working on this project. Certain features will not work if you are not using the most current version of Excel. Start this activity by opening the Excel workbook containing the dataset. You will be using the Excel file provided to create pivot tables and other data. Step-by-step instructions using the tutorial dataset follow for each of the requirements for the assignment. Requirement 1 asks, create 3 columns in the data worksheet that calculate sales revenue, cost, and gross profit for each sales record. For the first step in the first requirement, go to cell K2 in the data worksheet. Enter the formula for sales revenue, which is equals H2 times J2, and press enter. Point to the cells rather than typing them in. For the second step, click in cell L2. Enter the formula for total cost, which is equals I2 times J2. Again, point to the cells rather than typing in the names. For the third column, click in cell M2. Enter the formula for gross profit, which is sales revenue minus total cost, or equals K2 minus L2. Again, point to the cells rather than typing them in. There is a lot less potential for error that way. In the fourth step, copy the 3 formulas down to the rest of the rows by selecting the 3 cells, K2 through M2, and then double-clicking the fill handle, which is the small box in the lower right-hand corner of cell M2. For step 5, format the 3 columns by selecting the columns and on the Home tab, clicking Accounting Format. The default for accounting format is 2 decimal places, and that is what we want. Requirement 1 is complete. We have added 3 formatted columns to the data worksheet. Requirement 2 states, create a pivot table that shows sales revenue by region for each year. Correct any errors in the data set. Insert a pivot chart to show sales trends. The first step is to click anywhere in the data worksheet. Next, on the Insert tab, click the pivot table icon. Now, to accept the default range and to open a new worksheet, click OK. Double-click the New Worksheet tab to activate it and rename it Requirement 2. That will help keep track of the different pivot tables. By the way, if the Pivot Table Fields panel ever disappears, you can bring it back by clicking anywhere in the pivot table you have created. The next step is to click and drag Region in the Pivot Tables Field panel down to the Rows box. Drag Sales Revenue down to the Values box, and drag Date of Sale down to the Columns box. Your results should show years in the columns heading. If your pivot table shows individual dates with day, month, and year, follow the instructions on the next slide. If your columns have not grouped by year, follow the steps in this slide. Right-click on the first column's date. In this example, that is cell B4, and then select Group. In the Grouping dialog box, select Years and click OK. Now back to everyone. The next step is to examine the pivot table, looking for errors. Here we see that central has been entered as centrals at least once in the dataset. When you work on the large assigned dataset, there may be different errors, but the same visual inspection technique will work to find any errors. Navigate to the data worksheet. On the Home tab, click Find and select. In the menu, click Replace. In the Find and Replace dialog box, type the text you are searching for, centrals in this example, in the Find What field. Then, in the Replace With field, type the new text. Click Replace All. Excel will return a message box with the number of replacements that were made. Repeat Find and Replace until all of your dataset errors are fixed. For the next step, return to the Requirement 2 worksheet. Click in the data in the pivot table. Right-click and select Refresh. This process will update the pivot table so that the errors you corrected are no longer there. Next, we will format the data in the pivot table. Select the pivot table data and right-click to select Number Format. In the Format Cells dialog box, click Accounting and then click OK. Now we are going to insert a pivot chart in this same worksheet. Select the pivot table data and region row labels. Do not select the grand total data. On the Insert tab, click Pivot Chart. In the Insert Chart dialog box, click on the Clustered Column Chart and then click OK. Right-click one of the gray field buttons in the chart, and in the menu, click Hide All Field Buttons on Chart. Requirement 2 is complete. We created a pivot table that shows sales revenue by region for each year. We corrected errors in the dataset, and we inserted a pivot chart to show sales trends. Requirement 3 reads, create a pivot table that shows sales revenue, cost, and gross profit for each year. What is the impact on earnings each year? Click anywhere in the data worksheet. On the Insert tab, click the pivot table icon. Click OK to accept the default range and open a new worksheet. Rename the new worksheet Requirement 3. In the next step, drag Years in the Pivot Table Fields panel down to the Rows box. Drag Sales Revenue, Total Cost, and Gross Profit down to the Values box. Select the data in column B for sales revenue. Right-click and select Number Format. Now in the Format Cells dialog box, click Accounting and then click OK. Formatting steps for total cost data and for the gross profit data by selecting Data and right-clicking, selecting Number Format, and then selecting Accounting. Requirement 3 is complete. We created a pivot table that shows sales revenue, total cost, and gross profit for each year. The requirement asks you to calculate the net impact on retained earnings in each of the years from the transactions. Remember that gross profit will increase retained earnings. Requirement 4 reads, create a pivot table that shows the most profitable brand in each year as measured by gross profit. Click anywhere in the data in the worksheet. On the Insert tab, click the pivot table icon. To accept the default range and open a new worksheet, click OK. Now double-click the new worksheet tab to activate it and rename it Requirement 4. In the next step, drag Years in the Pivot Table Fields panel down to the column box, drag Brand down to the Rows box, drag Gross Profit down to the Values box. Now select the pivot table data and right-click. Select Value Field Settings, Number Format, and then Format as Accounting. Requirement 4 is complete. We created a pivot table that shows the most profitable brand in each year as measured by gross profit. Requirement 5 reads, within each brand, what was the most profitable collection in 2025 as measured by gross profit percentage. Use the field years to filter the data to include just the year 2025. You will need to add a calculated field to the pivot table to calculate the gross margin percentage. Within each brand, sort the collections by gross profit percentage, from the largest to the smallest. Click anywhere in the data worksheet. On the Insert tab, click the Pivot Table icon. Click OK to accept the default range and open a new worksheet. Rename the new worksheet Requirement 5. Next, drag Years in the Pivot Table Fields panel down to the Filters box. Drag Brand and Collection down to the Rows box. Finally, drag Gross Profit down to the Values box. On the Pivot Table Analyze tab, click Fields, Items, and Sets, and in the menu, click Calculated Field. For the next step, in the Insert Calculated Field dialog box, type Gross Profit Percentage in the name field. Add the formula equals gross profit divided by sales revenue. You want to point to the fields and click Insert Field rather than typing each of them in. Now click Add and then click OK. Select the data in the Sum of Gross Profit column and right-click. Select Number Format. In the Format Cells dialog box, select Accounting and click OK. Now select the data in the Sum of Gross Profit Percentage column and right-click. Select Number Format, and in the Format Cells dialog box, select Percentage and click OK. Just like the accounting format, the default for percentage format is 2 decimal places, and that is what we want. In the next step, click the Years filter icon, and in the menu, select 2025, and then click OK. Click on a cell in the pivot table for gross profit percentage at the collection level. Here we will click on cell C5. Next, right-click and select Sort. Then, click Sort Largest to Smallest. Requirement 5 is complete. We can see the most profitable collection for each brand as measured by gross profit percentage for 2025. Remember, you will have a lot more data in your pivot table. Requirement 6 reads, create a pivot table to answer the question, which region was the most profitable in 2025 as measured by gross profit percentage? Click anywhere in the data worksheet. On the Insert tab, click the Pivot Table icon. Next, to accept the default range and open a new worksheet, click OK. Double-click the New Worksheet tab to activate it and rename it Requirement 6. Now, drag Years in the Pivot Table Fields panel down to the Filters box. Drag Region down to the Rows box. Finally, drag Gross Profit and Gross Profit Percentage down to the Values box. Select the data in the Sum of Gross Profit column and right-click. Select Number Format. In the Format Cells dialog box, select Accounting and click OK. Now select the data in the Sum of Gross Profit Percentage column and right-click. Select Number Format. In the Format Cells dialog box, select Percentage and click OK. In the next step, click the Years filter icon, and in the menu, select 2025 and click OK. Now sort the data from largest to smallest, even though here in this small data set, it is already in that order. In the large data set, sorting from largest to smallest will make a difference. Click on a cell in the pivot table for gross profit percentage. Here we will click on cell C4, right-click and select Sort, and then click Sort Largest to Smallest. Requirement 6 is complete. We can see the most profitable region in 2025 as measured by gross profit percentage. Note that your finished pivot table will show all 8 regions. That concludes this data analytics tutorial covering sales, cost, and gross profit percentage analysis using Excel pivot tables and charts. This video was created by Dr. Wendy Tietz. Thanks for watching.